The crack of the auctioneer's gavel echoed through the pristine white walls of Meridian Equestrian Center. But it wasn't loud enough to drown out the sharp laugh that cut through the crowd like a blade. $50,000, came the mocking voice of Cornelius Blackthorne, his platinum cufflinks catching the arena lights as he gestured dismissively. That's what you're bidding for Tempest's legacy. You couldn't afford his feed for a month. Every head in the packed auction house turned toward the source of the disturbance. In the third row, a young woman with calloused hands and dirt under her fingernails stood frozen, her numbered paddle trembling in her grip. 19-year-old Melody Hartwell had scraped together every penny from her job at the local stable, sold her grandmother's jewelry, and borrowed against her future to be here today. The crowd's murmur grew louder as they took in the sight of her worn jeans, faded flannel shirt, and boots that had seen more barn floors than boardrooms. She looked like she'd wandered into the wrong event, surrounded by oil magnates, tech billionaires, and old-money equestrian families who treated million-dollar horses like collectible art. The bid stands at $50,000, announced the auctioneer, his professional demeanor wavering slightly as he glanced between Melody and the snickering crowd. Cornelius Blackthorne rose from his front row seat, his custom-tailored suit a stark contrast to everything Melody represented. At 62, he had built an empire in real estate and luxury resorts. But his true passion was collecting the world's finest horses, not to ride them, but to own them, to display them like trophies in his climate-controlled stables. This is ridiculous, Blackthorne's voice boomed across the arena. That girl probably hitchhiked here from some backwater farm. She's wasting everyone's time. The crowd's laughter was cruel and cutting. Melody felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her eyes fixed on the magnificent creature in the center ring. Tempest's legacy stood 17 hands high, his coat the color of storm clouds, with a mane that flowed like liquid silver. But it wasn't his beauty that had drawn her here. It was the story behind those intelligent dark eyes. 2 months ago, Tempest's legacy had been considered the most promising racehorse of his generation. Then came the injury that ended his career before it truly began. Now he was being sold as breeding stock, his value diminished in everyone's eyes but hers. Melody had watched the videos of his training sessions, seen the fire in his spirit, the way he moved like poetry in motion despite his setback. 100,000, Blackthorne called out casually, not even bothering to raise his paddle. The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air. Do I hear 110? Melody's heart hammered against her ribs. She had exactly $53,427 to her name. It represented every sacrifice she'd made since she was 14, every dream she'd deferred, every relationship she'd lost to her obsession with horses. But as she looked at Tempest's legacy, something extraordinary happened. The stallion, who had been restlessly pawing the ground and tossing his head at the crowd's noise, suddenly went still. His dark eyes found hers across the arena, and in that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. The horse stepped forward, his injured leg bearing weight without the slightest limp, and released a sound that wasn't quite a whinny but something deeper, more primal, a call that seemed to say, I'm yours if you'll have me. The arena fell silent. The silence stretched like a taut wire, broken only by the soft shuffle of Tempest's legacy's hooves against the sawdust. Every person in the arena felt the weight of the moment, though none could quite explain why. The horse's eyes remained locked on Melody's, as if they were the only two beings in the world. Cornelius Blackthorne's face flushed red with irritation. What are we waiting for? The girl clearly can't afford 55,000, Melody's voice cut through his words, clear and steady despite the tremor in her hands. The crowd erupted in whispers. Blackthorn's mouth fell open, then snapped shut as his eyes narrowed to slits. You're only prolonging the inevitable, little girl. 150,000. Melody's heart sank. She watched as the auctioneer's assistant updated the digital display board, the numbers glowing like a neon sign announcing her defeat. But then Tempest's legacy did something that made everyone in the arena hold their breath. The stallion reared up on his hind legs, not in distress or anger, but in a display of pure, magnificent power. His front hooves pawned the air as he released, a thunderous call that reverberated through the building's steel rafters. When he came down, he didn't land where he'd been standing. Instead, he had moved 3 steps closer to Melody's section, his eyes never leaving hers. That's unusual, murmured Dr. Vivian Ashford, the arena's head veterinarian, to her colleague. Tempest's legacy has been nearly catatonic since the injury. I've never seen him respond to anyone like this. From her seat in the VIP section, renowned horse trainer Isadora Fairmont leaned forward, her experienced eyes studying the interaction. She had worked with champions for 40 years, but she'd never witnessed anything quite like this. The horse was choosing his owner, not the other way around. 60,000, Melody called out, her voice gaining strength. Blackthorn laughed, but it sounded forced now. 200,000, let's end this charade. The auctioneer glanced nervously between them. The bid is at 200,000. Do I hear the horse is injured? Melody interrupted, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. His racing days are over. You're not buying a champion, Mr. Blackthorn. You're buying a broken dream. The crowd murmured at her audacity. No one spoke to Cornelius Blackthorn like that, especially not some unknown girl with dirt under her fingernails. Blackthorn's face turned purple. How dare you? But I'm not buying a broken dream, Melody continued, her voice rising with passion. I'm buying a horse who deserves to be loved, not displayed. A horse who needs someone who believes in second chances, as if responding to her words. Tempest's legacy took another step forward. The arena's security guards moved nervously, unsure whether to intervene. Horses weren't supposed to move freely during auctions. They were held by handlers, controlled, managed. But Tempest's legacy's handler had somehow lost his grip on the lead rope, and the horse was now moving entirely of his own accord. 75,000, Melody said, her voice breaking slightly as she reached into her jacket pocket. She pulled out a crumpled envelope, her last desperate hope. I have a certified check for $75,000. The crowd gasped. She had somehow found more money, though from where, no one could imagine. What they didn't know was that Melody had made a deal with the bank that morning, using her deceased father's small piece of land as collateral. It was a desperate gamble that would leave her homeless if she couldn't make the payments. Blackthorn's confidence flickered for the first time. 300,000, he snapped. But something had shifted in the arena's atmosphere. The crowd was no longer laughing at Melody. They were watching this impossible drama unfold with growing fascination. In the VIP section, several wealthy patrons were whispering among themselves, their expressions thoughtful rather than mocking. Tempest's legacy had now moved close enough to the barrier that he could have reached Melody if he'd wanted to. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his magnificent head held high, waiting. The injured leg that had ended his racing career bore his weight without a trace of the limp that had devastated his previous owner. The auctioneer cleared his throat. The bid stands at $300,000. Do I hear? Wait, came a voice from the VIP section. Isadora Fairmont stood up, her silver hair gleaming under the arena lights. I'd like to make a statement. The arena fell silent. Fairmont was equestrian royalty, a woman whose opinion could make or break careers in the horse world. I've been training horses for 40 years, she began, her voice carrying easily through the hushed space. And I've never seen anything like what's happening here today. That horse has chosen his owner, and we'd be fools to ignore it. Isadora Fairmont's words hung in the air like a challenge, shifting the entire dynamic of the auction. The crowd, which had been entertained by what they saw as a David and Goliath spectacle, suddenly realized they might be witnessing something far more significant. This is preposterous, Blackthorne sputtered, his usual composure cracking. That old woman is clearly suffering from some romantic delusion about horses. This is a business transaction, not a fairy tale. But Fairmont wasn't finished. She descended from the VIP section with the grace of someone who had spent decades around powerful animals, her presence commanding respect. Mr. Blackthorne, you've made your fortune in real estate and hospitality, but you've never truly understood horses. They're not commodities to be collected. Tempest's legacy watched Fairmont approach, his ears pricked forward with interest. When she reached the barrier, she extended her hand slowly. The stallion sniffed once, then allowed her to stroke his neck. His response was immediate and telling. He relaxed under her touch, but his eyes remained fixed on Melody. This horse was injured 6 months ago, Fairmont continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the Nassalant arena. A torn tendon that ended his racing career. But look at him now. She gestured to Tempest's legacy, who stood perfectly balanced on all 4 legs. Dr. Ashford, would you examine him, please? The veterinarian approached cautiously. Dr. Ashford had been the one to originally diagnose the injury that had shattered Tempest's legacy's racing future. She ran her hands down the stallion's leg, her expression growing more puzzled by the moment. This is extraordinary, she murmured. The scar tissue is still present, but the muscle tone, the way he's bearing weight, ... It's as if the injury never happened. Because it didn't matter, Melody said softly, her voice carrying despite its gentleness. The injury ended his racing career, but it didn't end his story. Horses aren't just racing machines. They're partners, friends, teachers. They have hearts and souls and the capacity to love. Blackthorne scoffed. Sentimental nonsense. I bid $400,000, and I want this ridiculous display to end. But something unexpected happened. From the crowd came a voice. $500,000. Everyone turned to see Prescott Vanguard, a tech billionaire known for his reclusive nature and rare public appearances. He had never shown interest in horses before, but something about this scene had clearly moved him. Mr. Vanguard, the auctioneer, stammered, "Are you bidding on the horse?" "No," Vanguard replied, standing up slowly. "I'm bidding on the story. I'm bidding on what this represents. That young woman has shown more courage and heart in the last 10 minutes than most people display in a lifetime." The arena erupted in murmurs. This was unprecedented. Melody stared at Vanguard in shock, her mind reeling. $500,000 was more money than she could imagine, but it also meant she would lose Tempest's legacy. "Sir," she said, her voice barely audible, "I can't compete with that. But I want you to know that horse doesn't need an owner. He needs a partner." Vanguard smiled, an expression that transformed his usually stern features. "I agree completely. which is why I'm not bidding to buy him. I'm bidding to buy him for you." The crowd gasped. Melody felt her knees go weak. "I don't understand." "I made my fortune in technology," Vanguard explained, his voice growing stronger. "But I've never forgotten what it felt like to be young and passionate and told. I couldn't achieve my dreams because I didn't have enough money. I recognize that fire in your eyes, young lady. It's the same fire that built my company, Blackthorn's." Face was now a dangerous shade of red. "This is highly irregular. You can't just give away a horse to some random girl." "Watch me," Vanguard replied coolly. "My bid stands at $500,000, with the stipulation that ownership transfers to Miss Hartwell," Melody whispered. "Melody Hartwell." "Miss Hartwell," Vanguard continued. "The money is mine, but the horse is hers." The auctioneer looked helplessly between the parties involved. This was far beyond anything in his experience. I need to consult with the auction house management." But before he could leave his podium, Tempest's legacy made the decision for everyone. The stallion stepped forward again, this time reaching the barrier that separated him from the crowd. Without hesitation, he lowered his great head and gently nuzzled Melody's outstretched hand. The touch was electric. Melody felt a connection she had never experienced before, an understanding that transcended words. The horse's dark eyes seemed to say, "I've been waiting for you." Dr. Ashford, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "In 40 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen a horse respond to someone like this. It's as if he's been waiting." For her specifically, Isadora Fairmont nodded. "Horses know. They always know. This isn't about money or prestige or collecting trophies. This is about partnership, about finding where you belong." The arena held its breath as the auctioneer returned. With the auction house manager, after a hurried conference, the manager stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, while this is an unusual situation, there are no rules preventing this arrangement. The bid of $500,000 is accepted, with ownership transferring to Miss Hartwell as specified by Mr. Vanguard." The gavel fell with a resounding crack that seemed to echo through more than just the arena. It reverberated through the lives of everyone present. Melody felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at Tempest's legacy, who had somehow found a way to lean his massive head over the barrier to rest against her shoulder. Cornelius Blackthorne stood frozen, his face cycling through emotions like a broken kaleidoscope. For the first time in his adult life, his money hadn't been enough to secure what he wanted. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "This is absurd," he muttered, but his voice lacked the venom it had carried earlier. "That horse is worth millions in breeding fees alone." Prescott Vanguard approached Blackthorne with measured steps. "Cornelius, I've known you for 20 years. We've done business together, competed against each other, and I've always respected your acumen. But today, you've shown me something I never expected to see." "What's that supposed to mean?" Blackthorne demanded. "You're afraid," Vanguard said simply. "For the first time since I've known you, you're afraid of something you can't control or buy." The crowd had begun to disperse, but many lingered, sensing that the drama wasn't over. Melody remained at the barrier, her hands gently stroking Tempest's legacy's neck, both of them seeming to draw strength from the contact. Dr. Ashford approached with a clipboard. "Miss Hartwell, I need to discuss Tempest's legacy's medical history with you. His injury was severe, and while he seems remarkably improved, he'll need ongoing care." "I understand," Melody replied, though her voice shook slightly. The reality of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. She now owned a horse worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but she had no stable, no land, no means to care for him properly. As if reading her thoughts, Isadora Fairmont stepped forward. "My dear, I have a proposition for you. My training facility has been looking for a new assistant trainer. The position comes with housing on the property and access to our facilities. The salary isn't much, but it would allow you to keep Tempest's legacy with you." Melody's eyes widened. "You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you a chance," Fairmont corrected. "What I saw here today, the connection between you and that horse, it's something that can't be taught, but it can be nurtured and developed." Blackthorne, who had been listening to the exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Wait just a minute. I may have lost the auction, but I'm not done with this situation." Everyone turned to look at him, tension filling the air once again. But instead of the anger they expected, Blackthorne's expression was thoughtful, almost contemplative. "That horse," he said slowly, "he really did choose you, didn't he?" Melody nodded, her hand still resting on Tempest's legacy's neck. "I think so. I felt it the moment I saw him." Blackthorne was quiet for a long moment, then did something that shocked everyone present. He walked over to Melody and extended his hand. "Cornelius Blackthorne, I believe we got off on the wrong foot." Melody hesitated, then shook his hand. "Melody Hartwell, Miss Hartwell, I owe you an apology. I've spent so many years acquiring things that I forgot what it meant to earn them. You've earned that horse's trust in a way I never could have, no matter how much money I threw at the situation." The crowd murmured in amazement. Cornelius Blackthorne was known for many things, but humility wasn't one of them. "I'd like to make you an offer," Blackthorne continued. "I have connections throughout the equestrian world, sponsors, trainers, facilities. If you're serious about working with horses, I can open doors for you." "Why would you do that?" Melody asked, genuinely puzzled. Blackthorne glanced at Tempest's legacy, who was watching the exchange with intelligent eyes. "Because that horse taught me something today. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy the kind of bond you to have. Maybe it's time I learned the difference between owning something and earning it." Prescott Vanguard smiled. "Cornelius, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." "Don't get ahead of yourself," Blackthorne replied, but there was no heat in his words. "I'm still a ruthless businessman, but maybe I can be a ruthless businessman with a conscience." Dr. Ashford cleared her throat. "If we're done with the life-changing revelations, I still need to discuss Tempest's legacy's care requirements." "Actually," Fairmont interjected, "I think we need to discuss something else first. Melody, what are your long-term goals with Tempest's legacy?" Melody looked at the horse, who had been patiently listening to the human conversation as if he understood. "Every word, I want to prove that a horse's worth isn't measured by how fast he can run or how much money he can make. I want to show that partnership is more valuable than dominance." "Therapeutic riding," Vanguard said suddenly. "I've been researching it for my foundation. Horses helping people with disabilities, trauma, emotional challenges, the healing power of the human-animal bond." Melody's eyes lit up. "That's exactly what I was thinking. Tempest's legacy has overcome his own trauma. Maybe he could help others do the same." The pieces were falling into place like a puzzle solving itself. Fairmont's facility, financial backing, Blackthorne's connections, and Melody's vision. It was the foundation of something extraordinary. But the most important piece was still Tempest's legacy himself, standing calmly in the center of it all, as if he had orchestrated the entire event. 6 months later, the morning sun cast long shadows across Fairmont Equestrian Center as Melody led Tempest's Legacy through his warm-up routine. The transformation in both horse and rider was remarkable. Tempest's Legacy moved with fluid grace, his coat gleaming with health, while Melody carried herself with the confidence of someone who had found her true calling. "Beautiful work," Isadora Fairmont called from the fence, where she watched the morning session with her usual critical eye. "His movement has improved dramatically since you started working with him." Melody smiled, patting Tempest's Legacy's neck. "He's teaching me as much as I'm teaching him, maybe more." The therapeutic riding program had exceeded everyone's expectations. What had begun as a simple idea had evolved into something extraordinary. Children with autism found peace in Tempest's Legacy's gentle presence. Veterans struggling with PTSD discovered that his steady rhythm helped calm their minds. Adults recovering from accidents learned to trust again through their partnership with the patient stallion. "The Henderson boy is coming in this afternoon," Fairmont mentioned, consulting her schedule. "His mother says he's been talking about Tempest's Legacy all week." 8-year-old Marcus Henderson had been their biggest success story. Born with cerebral palsy, he had struggled with balance and coordination his entire life. But something magical happened when he was with Tempest's Legacy. The horse seemed to sense exactly what the boy needed, adjusting his gait and movements to provide the perfect therapeutic experience. "We should probably discuss expanding the program," Melody said, leading Tempest's Legacy toward the barn. "The waiting list is getting longer every week." "Already in the works," came a familiar voice from behind them. They turned to see Prescott Vanguard approaching, his usually formal attire replaced by practical jeans and a work shirt. Over the past months, he had become a regular presence at the facility, drawn by the program's success and the profound changes he witnessed daily. "The Foundation has approved funding for the new therapeutic arena," Vanguard announced. "Construction starts next month." "That's wonderful news," Melody exclaimed. Then her expression grew serious. "But we'll need more horses trained for this kind of work. Not every horse has Tempest's Legacy's intuition." "Actually, I might have a solution for that," Vanguard said with a mysterious smile. "I've been working with someone who shares your vision." As if on cue, a familiar figure rounded the corner of the barn. Cornelius Blackthorne looked remarkably different from the man who had mocked Melody at the auction. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by practical riding clothes, and his previous arrogance had been replaced by something resembling humility. "Blackthorne Industries has acquired 3 horses from the same bloodline as Tempest's Legacy," he announced without preamble. "All of them have injuries that ended their racing careers. I thought you might be interested in evaluating them for the program." Melody stared at him in amazement. "You want to donate them to the therapeutic program?" "I want to invest in something that matters," Blackthorne corrected. "I've spent my entire life building monuments to my own ego. Maybe it's time I built something that actually helps people." The partnership between the unlikely allies had been one of the most unexpected developments of the past months. Blackthorne's business connections had opened doors that would have remained closed for years. His influence in the equestrian world had brought legitimacy to their program, while his financial backing had allowed them to help more people than they had ever dreamed possible. "There's something else," Blackthorne continued, his voice carrying a note of excitement. "I've been in contact with the University of California's veterinary program. They want to study what you've accomplished with Tempest's Legacy. His recovery has been so remarkable that they think it could revolutionize how we treat similar injuries. Dr. Ashford, who had become the program's chief veterinary advisor, nodded enthusiastically. The medical community is fascinated by Tempest's legacies. His healing has been unprecedented, and the data we're collecting could help countless other horses. Melody felt a surge of pride as she looked at Tempest's legacy, who had been listening to the conversation with his characteristic intelligence. He's not just healing himself anymore, he's helping heal others. As if understanding her words, Tempest's legacy nudged her gently with his nose, then turned his attention to the approaching group of children and their families. The afternoon session was about to begin, and he seemed to recognize his role as healer and teacher. "Look at him," Fairmont said softly. "He knows exactly why he's here." The first family to arrive was the Hendersons. Young Marcus broke free from his parents and ran toward Tempest's legacy with the unsteady gait that had once filled him with frustration. But now, that same gait carried him toward hope and healing. "Tempest?" Marcus called out, his face bright with joy. The stallion lowered his head to the boy's level, allowing Marcus to wrap his small arms around the horse's neck. It was a moment of pure connection, human and animal united in trust and love. "This is what it's all about," Vanguard said quietly. "This is why we're here." Melody nodded, her eyes bright with tears of joy. 6 months ago, I thought I was just buying a horse. I had no idea I was buying a miracle. "You didn't buy him," Blackthorn said with a rare smile. "He chose you. There's a difference." As the afternoon session began, Melody watched Tempest's legacy work with his young riders. Each child brought their own challenges, their own hopes, their own dreams, and somehow the stallion seemed to understand exactly what each one needed. The horse, who had been deemed broken, worthless, a failed investment, had become something far more valuable than any racing champion. He had become a bridge between the human and animal worlds, a teacher who spoke without words, a healer who worked miracles through simple presence and patient love, one year after the auction that changed everything. Melody stood in the center of the new therapeutic arena, watching as Tempest's legacy worked with their latest success story. Isabella Rossetti, a young woman who had lost her legs in a car accident, was experiencing the joy of movement again through her partnership with the gentle stallion. "I never thought I'd feel this free again," Isabella said, tears streaming down her face as Tempest's legacy responded to her subtle commands. "It's like he understands exactly what I need." The program had grown beyond anyone's wildest expectations. What had started as a simple therapeutic riding program had evolved into a comprehensive healing center that attracted visitors from around the world. The Hartwell Vanguard Foundation, as it was now known, had become a model for similar programs across the country. "The documentary crew will be here next week," Fairmont announced, approaching Melody with a tablet full of scheduling details. National Geographic wants to feature Tempest's legacy in their series on animal intelligence. Melody smiled, but her attention remained focused on the session in the arena. "He's going to hate all the cameras. He's never been one for showing off." "That's exactly why he's perfect for this," came Prescott Vanguard's voice as he joined them. "His humility is part of what makes him so effective. He doesn't perform for attention, he simply serves." Over the past year, Vanguard had undergone his own transformation. The reclusive billionaire had become a passionate advocate for animal therapy, using his resources and influence to support similar programs worldwide. His foundation had funded research that was revolutionizing the field of therapeutic riding. "The research results came in this morning," Dr. Ashford said, approaching the group with a thick folder. The data on Tempest's Legacy's healing process has been accepted for publication in the Journal of Veterinary Medicine. His case is being studied at veterinary schools across the country. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation belonged to Cornelius Blackthorne. The man who had once viewed horses as mere investments had become one of the program's most dedicated volunteers. He could often be found in the barn, quietly grooming horses or helping with feeding routines. "Blackthorne's here," Fairmont mentioned, nodding toward the barn entrance. "He brought those new financial projections you requested." Melody found Blackthorne in Tempest's Legacy's store, gently brushing the stallion's coat while discussing the day's schedule in the soft tone he had developed for talking to horses. The transformation in the man was as remarkable as any healing they had witnessed in the arena. The board approved the expansion to 3 additional locations, Blackthorne said without looking up from his grooming. Denver, Atlanta, and Portland. Each facility will be modeled after what we've built here. "That's incredible," Melody replied. "But we'll need to train more therapists, find the right horses, establish partnerships with local medical facilities." Establish partnerships with local medical facilities. "Already in progress," Blackthorne said with a slight smile. "I may have been skeptical of your methods initially, but I've learned to trust your vision. The infrastructure is being put in place now." As they talked, Tempest's Legacy stood patiently, his intelligent eyes moving between them as if following the conversation. Over the past year, he had become more than just a therapy horse. He had become the heart and soul of the entire program. "The university wants to bring a group of graduate students to study him next month," Dr. Ashford mentioned. "They're particularly interested in his ability to sense and respond to different types of emotional and physical trauma." "It's not science," Melody said softly, running her hand along Tempest's Legacy's neck. "It's something deeper than that. He simply cares. He wants to help." The afternoon session was winding down, and Melody prepared Tempest's Legacy for his final rider of the day. 8-year-old Marcus Henderson had become a regular, and his progress had been nothing short of miraculous. What had started as a child struggling with basic coordination had evolved into a confident young rider who was inspiring others with his determination. "Miss Melody," Marcus called out as he approached with his parents. "Did you see? I walked all the way from the car without my walker." "I saw," Melody replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Tempest's Legacy saw too. He's very proud of you." As Marcus climbed onto Tempest's Legacy's back, the horse stood perfectly still, his entire body language radiating patience and protection. The trust between them was absolute, built through months of gentle work and quiet understanding. "He saved my son's life," Marcus's mother said quietly to the assembled group, "not just physically, but emotionally." Marcus believes in himself now because Tempest's Legacy believed in him first. The session ended as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the arena in shades of gold and crimson. Tempest's Legacy had worked with 6 different riders that day, each with their own unique challenges and goals. He had adapted his energy, his movement, his very presence to meet each person's specific needs. The auction house called today, Vanguard mentioned as they prepared to close the facility for the evening. They wanted to know if we'd be interested in evaluating some of the horses going up for sale next month. Apparently, word has spread about what we're doing here. Melody looked at Tempest's Legacy, who was enjoying his evening meal with the contentment of a horse who had found his true purpose. "We'll look at them, but they'll have to choose us, just like he did." As the group prepared to leave, Blackthorne lingered beside Tempest's Legacy's stall. "You know," he said quietly, I spent 60 years trying to prove I was worthy of respect. But you taught me that worth isn't about what you achieve, it's about what you give. Tempest's legacy lifted his head from his feed bucket and gently nuzzled Blackthorn's shoulder, a gesture of acceptance and friendship that the former millionaire had never expected to receive. "Thank you," Blackthorn whispered. "Thank you for showing me what really matters." As the lights dimmed and the facility settled into quiet, Tempest's legacy stood in his stall. No longer the broken racehorse who had been mocked and dismissed. He had become something far more valuable than any champion. He had become a bridge between worlds, a teacher without words, a healer who worked miracles through simple presence and infinite patience. The horse who had been deemed worthless had created something priceless, a legacy of healing that would continue long after his own story ended. In choosing melody that day in the auction arena, he had chosen hope. And in being chosen, he had taught everyone around him that true value isn't measured in dollars or trophies, but in the lives we touch and the hearts we heal. The millionaire's mockery had been silenced by something far more powerful than money or prestige. It had been silenced by love, by purpose, and by the extraordinary bond between a young woman who believed in second chances and a horse who had been waiting his entire life to find his true calling. Their story was just beginning.